In Hawaii, we have an expression called the A'ama effect. The A'ama is a type of crab found here on the islands that are super fast, resilient, knows how to survive against the crashing waves on the rigid rocks. And if you've ever seen a bucket full of live A'ama crabs, then you already know. Now stay with me on this. We're not talking about crabs, but metaphorically speaking, because when one of them starts climbing toward the top, trying to get out, the others pull it back down, not out of cruelty or any intention to harm. They're just doing what crabs do, reaching, grabbing, holding on, and the result is that none of them get out. Now I want you to think about the people in your life, not with judgment or with blame, but honestly, because sometimes the bucket isn't a place, sometimes it's a relationship, and sometimes the ones doing the pulling have no idea they're doing it at all, and that's what we're talking about today. I'm Caren, and this is The Rewrite, a podcast about finding the courage to pursue the life you already know you're meant to live. Over the last several episodes, we've been doing deep internal work. Who you were before, the beliefs that have been running your life, the gifts you've been keeping small. But today we move from the internal to the external, because as much as the work of rewriting your life happens inside you, it also happens in the relationships around you. And some of those relationships are making the work a lot harder than it needs to be. Now let's start with the ones that are easier to identify. The people in your life who actively push back when you try to grow. Maybe they question your decisions or remind you of every time something didn't work out. They may even use humor to minimize what you're building, the kind of humor that has just enough edge to it that you don't quite know how to address it. Or maybe they're more direct than that. Maybe they tell you outright that you're dreaming too big or that you should be realistic. These are the obvious ones, and as painful as they are to be around, they're actually the easier ones to deal with because you can see them clearly. You know what's happening and you can create that distance. It's the second category that's much harder to navigate because these are the people who genuinely care about you. Friends, family, people who have been in your corner, who know your history, who show up when you need them. And they're not trying to hold you back. But here's what happens. They built their relationship with a version of you, the version that existed before you started growing in this direction, the version that was always the same, always comfortable to be around in a particular way. And as you start to change, as you start to take your calling seriously, to shift your priorities, to show up differently, they don't always know what to do with that. So they do what feels natural. They reference the old you or make jokes about how serious you've gotten. And none of it is malicious, but all of it creates pressure, consistent and invisible pressure to stay exactly who you were. And here's the part that makes it so difficult. You can't be angry about it because they care about you, and what they're doing comes from that place. But care, as genuine as it is, can still function as an anchor. And an anchor, no matter how well-intentioned it is, keeps you from moving. This one hit close to home for me because at some point I became aware that not every relationship I was investing in was pulling me forward. Some were comfortable, familiar, and some were genuinely caring. But when I looked honestly at where my time and energy were actually going, not all of it was moving me toward the life I knew I was meant to build. And that awareness was super uncomfortable because these weren't bad people or relationships I wanted to walk away from. But I did have to make a decision about access. Some of them I chose to keep at a healthy distance, not with bitterness or judgment, just with the understanding that my time, my energy, and my focus needed to go toward the life I was building. And there's a difference between walking away from someone and simply being more intentional about how much of yourself you give to a relationship that isn't giving back in the same way. Because elevating relationships and comfortable relationships are not always the same thing. An elevating relationship challenges you. It reflects back who you're becoming rather than who you've always been. A comfortable relationship feels easy, familiar, and safe. And there's nothing wrong with comfort. But if comfort is all a relationship ever offers, it might be keeping you exactly where you are. I had to make some intentional decisions about how I was investing myself. Not walking away from people I cared about, but being more deliberate about where I was putting my most valuable resources because those things are finite and the life I was building needed them. Here's what I want you to understand about both types of relationships we've been talking about: the obvious ones and the subtle ones. Neither of them requires you to walk away entirely. This episode is not about burning your relationships down. It's about becoming aware of what each relationship is doing in your life. Because here's the question that matters. When you spend time with the people in your life, do you walk away fuller or emptier? Do you walk away more motivated or more resigned and drained? Because those answers tell you something important. Not about whether the people are good or bad, but about whether the relationship is serving the life you're building. And those are two completely different questions. I want to offer you a different way to think about your relationships. Instead of asking who supports me and who doesn't, ask this: which of my relationships are pulling me toward who I'm becoming, and which ones are anchoring me to who I was? Because you need to be aware of both. The ones pulling you forward deserves more of your time and your presence. The ones anchoring you back deserve your care, but maybe not the same access they always had. And that distinction is not a betrayal or being cold or selfish. It's one of the most honest and necessary things you can do for yourself and for the people who you care about. Because when you stop growing, you stop having anything new to give. And the people in your life deserve the version of you that's still becoming, not the one that stopped. And here's something worth holding on to as you sit with all of this. Sometimes when you commit to your own growth, it gives the people around you a level of motivation to grow too. Not always and not immediately, but your willingness to become who you're meant to be can be the very thing that quietly inspires someone else to ask the same questions about their own life. You don't have to lower yourself to bring people with you. Sometimes the most powerful thing you can do for the people you care about is to simply refuse to stop growing. So before the next episode, here's what I want you to do. Think about 3 people you spend the most time with. Not who you wish you spent time with, who you actually do. Write their names down, and next to each name, write one honest answer to this question: after I spend time with this person, do I feel more like who I'm becoming or more like who I used to be? No judgment, no decisions required yet. You don't have to do anything dramatic with that answer. But seeing it clearly changes how you move through the world. Just honesty. Because you cannot be intentional about something you haven't looked at directly. And sometimes that's exactly where the rewrite begins. Thank you so much for staying with me through this one. I know this episode might have stirred something. Maybe a name came to mind that made you uncomfortable, or maybe a pattern you've been avoiding looking at became a little harder to ignore. And that's exactly what it's supposed to do. Not to make you feel guilty or to make you feel like you've been doing something wrong. Many of us are still working through this, but it gives you the clarity to make better choices going forward. Because the life you're building deserves the right people around it. And so do you. If this episode hit close to home, drop it in the comments and share it with someone who needs to hear it. Every share helps this message reach someone who's ready for it. Make sure you're subscribed. New episodes drop every week, and where we're going next builds directly on what we've uncovered today. And in spite of what's going on in the world, it's still a great time to be alive because we still get to choose. And that's a beautiful gift. I'm Caren, and this is The Rewrite, because your story isn't finished yet.